myself in order. We do have quorum. Good. Morning. Welcome to the Bricktown Urban Design Commission meeting for, what is today, April 11th, 2018. We are commencing the meeting at 9:01 a.m. Jennifer, would you mind doing the roll call?
Brent Wall.
Here.
Jonathan Dodson. Kasha Egan. Here. Omar Curry. Richard Cowan.
Here.
Ava Scaramucci. And Cindino Thompson.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 2, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
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 All opposed, nay. The item passes. Item number 3, cases withdrawn, we have none. Item number 4, continuance requests, we have none. Item number 5, consent docket, we have none. Item number 6A, BCA-170028. This is the consideration of the ADA ramp in Bricktown that has, this is the third month that we've considered this item. Michael, would you mind getting us up to speed on anything that's occurred since our last meeting?
Sure. As you mentioned, this item has been at the committee on their agenda twice before, once in February, once in March, continued both times. At the last meeting, there was extensive discussion with regard to the design of the ramp and how it impedes visual access of the canal from the street, sidewalk and the street. There was a lot of discussion about alternative designs that might be less visually obtrusive or conversely might create more of a statement for the Bricktown district and identity by putting in something more substantial than just a ramp. At the end of the meeting, it was agreed that the item would be continued in hopes of getting a rendering that would show the extent of the visual impact of this ramp as viewed from Oklahoma Avenue. At the meeting, we thought we were going to get one. After the meeting, we found out the Public Works Department would not provide that rendering. And so we've brought the item back to you for your consideration. Essentially, everything that you've seen in the previous 2 reports is still here. 2 significant differences from the last 2 versions of the report. First of all, we did include sheet S12. That was a matter of discussion at the last meeting. It has some detail about the structural supports for this ramp. And secondly, we provided 2 photos at the end of our presentation that were not in previous packets that show the view of the area where the ramp is going to go in from looking up from the canal level, because there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting regarding what the use of that area was currently and whether or not the ramp would be impacting any current use of that area by the canal level businesses. We've described for you in our staff report that this is a landscaped area and none of the businesses down there are using it for outdoor dining or patio purposes. So it's just a landscape area that would be probably significantly transformed by the removal of some of the substantial landscape that is in there if the ramp were to be approved in this location. So with that, that concludes our presentation for you this morning. We're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Michael. As you mentioned, I think there's a group of concerns that have been voiced over the past couple of meetings. We were hoping to get some sort of a graphic representation that would help us visualize this a little bit better, which we did not get. The additional engineering sheets are helpful in terms of understanding how the ramp will cantilever out over and sort of how it would mechanically come together. which I do believe is helpful. Personally, I can kind of start the conversation, hopefully, is, I totally understand the challenge of what is trying to happen here, and I understand that it's not an easy fix. I think the only problem that I have is that there were quite a few items that were administratively approved that seem to have a lot of aesthetic bearing on the area. Another ramp across the street that's very similar, so that ramp has already been approved. So if we do anything differently here, it affects the cohesiveness of both of these items. So in a way, I feel like we need to work with this just because we already have that one item in place, and doing something different would make this item stand out. So that's kind of my personal thought, but I definitely would love to hear from the other commissioners and their thoughts this morning.
I appreciate your concern about having a mismatched pair, given that they're on different sides of the canal. I'm not necessarily all that worried about it. I've also had some thoughts on, there are even other alternatives that might have a stronger relationship to the triangular geometry of this bridge. I think this has a really negative impact on the canal, on the Kingman building, right there at the front door. It's one of the most decorative front doors in all of Bricktown. It's kind of an extraordinary piece of Oklahoma history. Don't know how that beautiful cast stone that we see on the screen in front of us came to be there, but it's remarkable. And we're going to compress it even further with this, constriction of the sidewalk. I think there's got to be some sort of, rethinking of the whole idea. I'm definitely not in favor of this, and would like to move to deny it. That's my position.
I had some questions regarding the ramp itself, because we're ramping up, so a question is, how many layers of handrail are we going to have that even more so diminishes the view to the canal once the ramp's there? Because I can't really, you're changing differential, so is it just one single handrail on the pedestrian side before the ramp, or and how many layers are going to be before we're just fully obstructing the view of the canal from the street level?
I'm Jim Llewellyn. I'm with Facilities Program Manager for the Public Works Department. And the additional handrails, for safety, they're just required. There will be an additional layer of handrail in there, but it's a typical handrail that we've used throughout the Bricktown area.
So does that mean, on the pedestrian side, right in front of this door that Richard's speaking of, are we going to have 3 layers of handrail then? One that's on the flat surface, one that's on the elevated ramp side, and then one on the canal ramp side?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh. So I guess there'd be the same number of handrails that are existing.
It would go from one rail existing to two.
Yeah. And then a portion of this ramp will, as it connects to where the lift has already been removed, a portion of this will be over patio space for dining. And I see that you are using steel grating. I think there'll be a concern for foot traffic to have debris falling on patrons. That should be a big consideration before we accept that. We got to take into consideration that that space is being used, and I agree. I understand what we're doing, and it's a complicated, very tight constraint area, and we need to have access to that upper area from the street, but I do worry about particles falling on people where they're sitting at that restaurant.
The limited overhang it has, there shouldn't be a whole lot of issue with that, but if it's a concern, we can go with a solid surface right there. Use something like a diamond plate metal or something like that.
Just over. I mean, so would that apply over the whole area, or are we just talking about a patchwork on a portion of the ramp?
If we replace it on one portion, we'd probably replace it on the entire thing to get a more aesthetic appearance.
I mean, just out of consideration for the restaurant seating below, I think they would appreciate it.
I mean, we took a lot of that in consideration. That's part of the reason the entire structure is cantilevered, to not intrude on that space below any more than absolutely necessary. I mean, there was additional cost to go with the cantilever design,
Sure.
like I said, just to not infringe on that area any more than necessary.
I think they would appreciate it. So those are the two comments that I really had for today.
Mike, could you remind me what the difference in the requirements were for this side of the ramp, for this side of the street that's before us today versus the ramp on the other side that was administratively approved?
In terms of compliance with the guideline, or?
Well, I think, and also just, why this one's up for review and the other one was met the administrative approval threshold.
We looked at both ramps, and the guideline at hand is talking about visual access to the canal from the street. In our judgment, the ramp that they've proposed on the northwest side of the bridge is further back from the canal than this one is, and does not present either as significant or any visual impact that we could tell in terms of viewing the canal looking west from Oklahoma as in comparison to the visual impact that this ramp has. And that's why we decided to approve it administratively, because it was not, in our opinion, in conflict with the guideline.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Llewellyn did give me some shop drawings of the proposed ramp before the meeting that he didn't mention, but I can pass out to the members of the committee.
It'll provide a little better elevation angle.
Jim, do you know how this steel is meant to be finished? I haven't seen, is it painted or is it?
I believe it's painted just like the other handrails in the area.
And it's black, if I am correct?
I think it's more of a dark green.
Dark green. Okay, dark green. Okay, thank you.
The intent was to make it match all the existing as much as possible, so it didn't look like an afterthought, that it blended in as well as possible. I mean, we considered a number of different options on this. It has to be an L-shaped ramp because of the elevation difference. You need a certain amount of length to accommodate the 80 requirements, and that's not possible just, with a strictly straight ramp. There's been discussion about lifts and elevators. In the end, a lift would be much more visually impairing than the ramp, and we've had maintenance issues with ADA lifts all through the city. And in fact, I mean, there was some discussion previously about elevators. Even elevators in unconditioned space are a continual maintenance issue. We have those in parking garages, and I mean, we have service calls on those almost weekly. For the amount of funds we have available and for trying to make it blend in as well as we could, we felt like this was the best option.
Well, it seems like we have one major problem. Richard's just generally, what I'm reading is that you'd like for them to come back with maybe a couple of different options, additional exploration of ways to handle this. Okay. Kasha is concerned with the grading, primarily the handrail as well.
Yeah. I guess the other question is, and I know you've already done this study, and I should have walked down there yesterday when I was over there, is this just for access to the upper area where we have the taco stand and whatever potential businesses down south of that, east. I guess I'm wondering, is there no other location where we could have considered, because I know this is exactly where the lift was, so that's where we thought made the most sense for access for the public. But I know there's that alleyway. Is there nowhere else to the east that was considered or looked at for the location of this ramp?
Not without seriously affecting the sidewalks below or other businesses. It's, because of the traffic patterns and this location, we felt like this was the best location for the ramp.
Because I'm thinking if we're just talking about that specific location, you'd have to drag people through the alleyway to elevate up there.
So I guess I'll go ahead and give a little bit of feedback. I think this is a challenging situation because I think we have a sort of, kind of a mandate to look at the guidelines and then sort of factor in our own approaches or perspective on how to interpret those guidelines and how, these things aesthetically will fit into the form and function of what's going on in Bricktown as a historic district. And I understand the challenges with this particular site and the design, so I don't envy you guys' task. I think it actually is this is one of the big challenges of these committees because it feels like it maybe puts us a little bit in conflict because we need a ramp, we need people to have good access to this part of the area. But I'm kind of like Richard. One of my first memories, actually ever, of Bricktown before there was a canal or anything else is the Kingman building. And it just feels like we're moving in the wrong direction aesthetically and generationally to be sort of constricting the site. And seems like it's not that big of a deal, but I just feel like incrementally we're kind of moving in the wrong direction on how we preserve and highlight that corner just in the broader context of the district. So anyway, I think this is kind of a crappy circumstance for everybody.
I mean, like I said, we've investigated other options, and this was the best solution of a list of bad choices. I mean, the view of that building from the canal area will be restricted a little bit more from that position, but when you're farther back on the canal, you'll still be able to see the entire building just because of the angle of approach. Like I said, an enclosed elevator or something like that is going to be much more visually restricting. We looked at options for other sites, and because of ADA requirements and not wanting to constrict the sidewalks any further, this was determined to be the best location to provide access to that level. I mean, we think it'd be great if we had both the funding and there was a great architectural solution that, everybody'd look at and say, oh, wow. But, We're just not aware of one. And like I said, within the guidelines of trying to make it blend in with the existing and not look like an afterthought, this is the best proposal we can come up with.
What did we do for this condition on the north side? Isn't that ramp tucked up against the existing building? Because that ramp is fairly new. Am I not thinking correctly on the north side of the canal? Because that's...
With the Jim Brewer building, there's a brand-new ramp that wasn't there 12 months ago, that you can now get access and then go east along the north side of the canal, and then there's a bridge about mid-block that can bring you back over.
Yeah.
So the accessibility has improved a little bit. It's a very out-of-the-way route.
Yeah.
There's no question the ramp is a better idea than an elevator because it functions usually all the time. Ramps very rarely break, you know.
They better not.
We have bigger problems than this aesthetic one if the ramp is breaking. But
that was, I'm just thinking, because that was tucked away from the canal, and, I obviously don't know how that impacts the existing building, but obviously those stairs happened before we hit the doors of the taco stand. And that seemed to be a successful solution. That was definitely done before. I mean, it was fairly recent, yeah.
This whole quandary, and I certainly appreciate, as a real estate developer, I appreciate budget more than you could possibly imagine, and the mechanical failure of elevators that are left outside. Elevators don't enjoy being left outside in the weather. Even humidity will break them. I mean, they're incredibly delicate and fragile. On the other hand, I was working on a different building several years ago with a group of very imaginative architects, and they started off with this outrageous idea to build a 5-story outdoor staircase. I'm not suggesting a staircase. What I'm talking about is an exercise in imagination and dreaming. That staircase never got built into a 5-story staircase, but it did end up leaving a residue in the building of 2 orange metal staircases that related to one another, and as a result, people use the stairs in this building all the time, and in a comparable building, people would just be taking the elevator. And it's through that sort of outrageous imagination where they're kind of going, well, what if, you had a ramp that, rather than hugging the wall or the retaining wall side, what if it somehow, floated out over the water, which is a crazy idea, totally crazy idea. But it begins to take us down maybe some different paths. At some point in the future, the southwest corner of this particular intersection of the canal and Oklahoma Avenue will probably get developed, and we'll probably have a hotel that has a restaurant at the canal level where there's currently, metal pilings. And you certainly wouldn't want to have a big tumbling ramp, which is going to be incredibly long to get to the lower level of the canal, because we're getting up to the upper level, but really the lower level is where we need tremendous access in order for the canal to really fulfill its potential. And when you look at how long a ramp would have to be to get down to those lower levels and do away with the need for mechanical access, that's really going to be difficult. And we certainly wouldn't want to push a ramp up against that, sheet piling. And it might be that a ramp that came closer to the water that, had some sort of, didn't impede the boats, but didn't impede the pedestrians either, that made its way all the way down, could be a real interesting exercise in architectural design. And I feel like the canal, again, we went on this adventure a couple of years ago down to San Antonio, really trying to study why their canal works and why ours is stuck, not really realizing its development potential. And for a lot of reasons, it's hard to get down to our canal, to the canal level, the water level itself. So I think this is part of the bigger picture, and, Brent, to your point about, a precedent, we've got one already, and now we add a matching one. Next thing you know, that becomes the only language we're going to use to get down to the canal. And one of the examples we found in San Antonio is there are lots of different ways and means of, it's almost always staircases till you get out to the Pearl District, and then they've got all ADA stuff. Has so much to do with the age of San Antonio, the infrastructure. It all predates ADA as a law. San Antonio Canal is well over 40 years old. But I think what we have the opportunity here to do is take a pause. We do have a ramp that wasn't there, a while back on the north side of the canal, and just ask the question, like, is there another language that could get us both up and down? And could we throw that out to some of our, dreamiest, architects in town? We've got some talent here in the city, and say, we don't need a set of plans, just we need some concepts that are pedestrian friendly, mothers with strollers friendly, because that's really, it's, yes, people in wheelchairs, of course, but there's thousands and thousands of people that come with little kids that want to get on the boat, and it is really hard to get down to get to the boat. And so ramps are wonderful, wonderful thing, and I just feel like we're going to walk past an opportunity here to not just get this to where it works better and is more inviting visually to what's going on in the canal, but also we miss an opportunity to maybe go after getting people all the way down to the water, and that's where the magic happens.
Well, I can see the appeal of having some kind of a spectacular, iconic structure, put in that place, but with the limited resources that we have for this project, that would have to be something with some other type of funding. I mean, that could be another MAPS project, if we're wanting to do something like that. Would it be limited to this spot, or would we look at the entire canal and put in iconic structures all up and down the canal? I mean, it's something worth considering, but to go through that exercise on this project would probably mean we'd have to eliminate all the other improvements that are part of this project in the Bricktown area. I mean, we have a limited amount of resources, and we need to use those to the best advantage of the citizens of the city. And, at this point, this is how much money we have, and this is our best solution. And although I'm sensitive to, it would be nice to have something really dramatic, something that floated out over the water, something with amazing structural appeal. That's not really part of the scope of this project.
Jim, was this a bond issue project or a budgeted public works project?
No, actually, I believe the funds are through the TIF. The tax increment finance. There are additional funds through that for Bricktown improvements.
Is there anybody in the audience that was wishing to speak today on this? Okay. Just want to make sure we did. Saw somebody out there. Just want to make sure you weren't here to voice an opinion either way. Thank you.
I wanted to say just staff's opinion was, yes, we brought it to committee because it does potentially conflict with the guideline about visibility to the canal in a way that the one on the north side did not, because it's a completely different site in terms of clearances. We recommended approval because it matches the existing, and there's lots of precedent throughout all the design review districts for things to be allowed to match existing. And because access to the canal is as much of the experience of the canal, is probably the primary experience of the canal than just visual access. So to us, that the infringement on the visual access was outweighed by the fact you were increasing access to it. And so Jim alluded to there were a slew of administrative approvals involving ADA ramps, sidewalk replacements, up and down Oklahoma, up and down Sheridan, reworking corners. So I asked him about the funding because this is a part of a bigger initiative to increase safe, not just access, but safe access, so you're not tripping on things to get from point A to point B.
I think that I could appreciate actually the sort of broader scope of what's happening. I think probably a bigger concern, and this may or may not be what was intended for this committee, but I think Richard did a pretty good, eloquent job, probably more than me actually, of identifying like the broader sort of longer term kind of concerns with these kind of designs. And again, I think I just keep having to reiterate, it seems like a very small and simple thing, but I think it has broader implications because our job relates again a lot to form, function, as it is our perception in relation to sort of the historic kind of integrity, opportunity in the district, and it's these kinds of decisions that sort of I feel like they start to push us in one direction or another, and I feel like there's been a pretty significant resurgence recently, a lot as far as interest and activity in Bricktown. I think it's been good, but I think we have also had to really make sure to encourage things like sidewalk and street corner activity, to make sure that as the district is built up or as it's revitalized or reinvigorated, that we're encouraging the things that that keep its vitality, but also that maintain that sort of historic character. So I think that there is I'm a huge fan of access. I don't think this particular ramp solves the access quandary. I think there's a larger challenge there, frankly, and I do have concerns about the direction that we started to drift into for thinking about how that looks in the future, even thinking about the next comprehensive sort of relook at improving access, things like that. These things won't get undone by that. In fact, that effort will be informed by these things, and it will sort of add on. So it's a little bit of, these are the kinds of maybe little things that actually become larger contributing factors to what I think is our sort of overall intent and purpose for being here. So like I said, I think it's a challenge. I appreciate it. I hate elevators for outdoor spaces like this because they're not practical. Lifts to me are, frankly, personally, a waste of time. I just don't think that we've got a really good solution for a really complicated intersection. A pedestrian, roadway, street access, canal access, because I think that this corner is different.
Okay, so I think we've got some really strong opinions and some guidance for the committee. I think we have a few options. One option would be to continue again with the stipulation that we would like to see some of those maybe studies that had already been done, or come back with another option that better fits what some of the concerns or helps solve some of the concerns that the committee's had today, including the expanded metal grading, and then I would, under this current scheme, I'd really like to see what's happening below it better with the landscaping. Is it coming out? Is there a plan for new landscaping? Is landscaping funded? That would be sort of option A, I think, for us.
Well, and sorry to interrupt you, but to add to that point, as I'm thinking about the patrons below and grading over that, now we're even obstructing the view even further. So I don't know what I'm saying, but back to the whole beginning of this, the solutions are really complicated.
Right.
And I will just thirdly reiterate and agree that these decisions that we're making do affect the long-term vision and the story that we're telling of the canal and these slippery slopes. It is a small ramp, but I don't think it's something that we're willing to justify and take very lightly for the impact that it's going to start having. I agree, accessibility is something we absolutely have to achieve, because if we can't make it accessible, people aren't going to come no matter how pretty we make it. But it's going to be a tough solution.
Well, I think, what the committee is saying is that we want this to feel like we want it to be functional, we want to achieve all the goals of functionality. It doesn't necessarily have to be a spectacular architectural showpiece. For me, the big thing is I want it to feel like that it fits in, and that it's sort of a seamless transition with what's already there, and that I think the concern with the committee is that it feels maybe that it's sort of tacked on to the side right now, and that it's a solution that is kind of the easiest. I mean, this is a hard solution, but it's the easiest solution in terms of the cost and the amount of effort put into it to get it through this committee right now. So I think, as we move forward here today and make a motion, that option is to continue it and ask you all to come back to us with a better option.
I mean,
the second option
with all due
would be,
respect, I don't think there is a better option. I mean, to put a ramp in a high traffic area like this, without just, I mean, we have a limited amount of space, and we have, requirements to get from one elevation to another within a certain distance. I mean, we can defer it and we can look at it again, but I don't know that we're going to be able to bring back anything that's going to be more appealing to you. I don't want to sound negative on it, but, to meet ADA requirements and to look at the amount of space we have there, there is some landscaping underneath there that would probably change it out to more like shade plants. If we need to do that as part of this project, we can. Normally Parks maintains that area, and they would put in whatever plants would do well in that area. It's a bad situation, but we've done what we feel is the best to make it look like it belongs there. It was part of the original project, and I mean, I'm just not aware of what we could bring back that would make it more appealing to you.
Yeah.
okay.
I had one last question. I'm sure this has been asked already, but I'm just going to maybe rehash it. So the concept actually of going further into the existing sidewalk where the steps and things like that are and where that lift is or is to be taken out is that it impedes the access of the restaurant to that patio area? Is that the challenge there? I mean, so from the standpoint of I'm just thinking if the ramp actually was to be built at the existing sidewalk, and I'm sure it would be a longer rise and longer distance, is the challenge there that it impedes the access from the other side of the sidewalk to the patio there?
Well, if I understand your question, because of the difference in elevations, to just make that a direct route, there's too much of a change in elevation for the amount of distance we have available to make that, and it makes the slope too steep to comply with ADA requirements. That was one of the things we looked at, on this ramp, was to have it come directly off the sidewalk instead of an L shape and go directly up to that elevation to where it would be less obtrusive. Mm-hmm. But like I said, because of the difference in elevation and the required slopes for ADA requirement, that was not possible. So we had to L the ramp to get enough distance to make it compliant.
And I'm assuming that's because it would essentially reduce access to the patio section of that sidewalk. I mean, because the sidewalk itself runs in front of all
Make it
this
long
building.
enough, we'd have to
Right.
cut out a significant portion of the patio,
Right.
and that would not be, the property owner would probably not be happy about that.
Yeah. Well, but, so, and just to clarify, is it the property owner's patio, or is that easement to the city?
Well, it's over the city easement.
Okay.
It's probably there through a revocable permit.
Not trying to design anything here, but if you just took the existing L-shaped design and rotated it 180 degrees, where it wasn't, you didn't have to do any demolition, but now it's out basically floating over the edge of the canal, and then the long part gets slightly longer and the short part slightly shorter, and it just, comes past and then connects back to the upper sidewalk. So the money you would save on demolition and removing light poles, et cetera, you could then spend putting a couple of, vertical columns under it to support it floating out over the canal, and now we can see under this thing instead of it being the sort of double layer of fencing. We haven't turned it into an architectural monument. This idea of basically, moving it to where your point of entry, but then you come past, it's still somewhat disruptive to this outdoor dining, but actually quite a bit less, and then you just connect to this upper level just past the staircase. It's still made out of the same stuff, but you're now not compressing the front door of the Kingman building down to 6 feet, and you could see under this thing. It might be cost neutral.
Well, we'd be having to add columns to support it because it wouldn't be able to cantilever it off the building. So you'd have a number of support structures underneath there that'd have to be added that would, one of them, looking at it here, one of them might be able to be on the edge of the canal, but then we'd have another one that's probably going to have to be right in the sidewalk area.
On just this ramp?
Well, to flip it around, what I'm understanding, if you're talking about, the supports are going to have to be somewhere under.
Yeah, there would have to be some additional supports, but you've already got quite a few supports underneath this thing, cantilevering it out over the retaining
Well,
wall.
the patio has supports, but part of our intent on the ramp was to cantilever it to where there were no supports underneath it. That was part of the reason for this design, is to limit the intrusion on the lower level. The whole structure is entirely cantilevered as it is now. There are no beam or no columns to go down to the lower level. We have a brace on the street side. It's basically like a 45-degree brace that goes back to that concrete wall that's over that landscape area.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, there are no supports. We could investigate it, but it's going to have to be supported because I'm sure the patio wasn't designed to carry that additional load. So we can't cantilever off of it or support off of it. We'd have to put columns in.
I can barely hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying that I doubt that the patio was designed to carry additional load to where we could just tie it straight into that. So we would have to add additional columns to support it underneath that would come in on the sidewalk area.
Regarding those issues of cost, Project 180 cost about $3,500 a linear foot, and that's definitely a TIF project as best I understand it. There is ongoing investment in Bricktown, hotels that are in the planning process, about to be started. My understanding of how TIF functions is that, we invest and then values rise and then the increment gets larger. And I definitely feel like here we're talking about a small move in the budget, especially when you compare it to the kind of Project 180, $3,500 a linear foot of new street and how much of it has been invested. And I think, again, the canal is one of the original MAPS projects. It's underperforming in terms of its potential. When it finally becomes what it could become, it's going to do phenomenal things for the city. And I just feel like we've got to invest in it. And here we're now down to, a couple of columns or supports here or there to try and make it more in the spirit of trying to, make this place as delightful and inviting as possible. That's what Bricktown has to offer. It's about experience and delight and surprise, and that's why 6 million people come down there to visit it. Disney is completely ADA compliant, and you'll go to the magical kingdom and you'll go over a bridge that should be a perfect arch, but it has the moments of landing at it. You come down your gradual slope and then have the proper landing spot, and then off you go on down, and it does have a tendency to break the effect. When you're in Paris, you don't run into that. When in the old European, magic of delight and surprise, they weren't thinking about ADA stuff at all. But we can't lose the fact that we're trying to create delight and surprise and experience. If we just say, well, we have to do this, this is all we can afford, and this is just practical, and we have to get it so people can get there and can access it, and then we end up with a place that nobody really wants to access because we've lost the magic of the place. We've lost the delight and the surprise. We've gone in the wrong direction. And I hate to be difficult about this, but I feel like we've got to try harder here and find either a few more dollars in the budget to try and do something just slightly more
Richard,
fun and open.
we need to pause the meeting for just a second until we regain quorum.
Yes.
So
Sorry.
we're just going to pause for a second.
Do I need to wind back and re-say the things I said? No, I was just kidding. That was a joke.
Pretty sure I knew where you were going.
You knew what I was going to say anyway. I'm like a 2-bit talking machine, just says the same thing again and again. So,
The only thing I would point out is, regarding the TIF funding and Project 180, TIF funds are restricted to that portion of the TIF. That was part of TIF 2. This is a separate district. The project was to provide ADA compliance and maintenance improvements, to improve the quality of the area. We don't have a large pool of money we can draw from. I'm not saying there may not be some additional funds, but, we can look at it again, but I think what you're talking about as far as improving the Bricktown area, I think that would better be addressed in like a comprehensive plan that has, adequate funding and instead of trying to patch something in here and something different later. I mean, I think what you're talking about would be a general review of the entire Bricktown area and ADA accessibility and things like that, which is way beyond the scope of what we're trying to do here.
I certainly appreciate your point. And if a private developer brought something in like this, because it's tacked on, it's incremental, it's a small little addition that then sets a precedent for other things that get added on, we would have the same, consternation, gnashing of teeth, whatever that we're putting you through. And I've been there. We'll be back next month, probably standing on that side, recusing myself on a Bricktown proposal. And we've had people here that we want to do a comprehensive plan for Bricktown because we aren't seeing very many. I mean, you're the only thing on our agenda today, and Bricktown isn't surging the way it has in times past, and I think that this is one of the reasons we want to be really cautious about what happens in Bricktown. Some really good things are about to happen in Bricktown once the streetcar gets open and construction is over. I mean, it's going to be a whole new day and a new experience, and I think that's part of the pressure to get this done because there is going to be a tremendous amount of increased foot traffic. I can't be in favor of this design. I will say one other thing that bothers me about it. Trash is kind of just an omnipresent thing, and the way I had imagined it, because we didn't have a lot to go on with the rendering that's on the screen, I'd imagined a retaining wall, but instead that's going to be, iron and trash is just going to blow under there, and there's always trash, and it's going to be hard to get it out from under there. It's going to be an unfortunate space underneath that thing, or it's just going to blow on through on down to the lower level. I don't know. I don't like this design at all, and I don't like its slicing up of the patio. I can't get in support of this design, and I hate to be that guy, but that's where I'm at on it because I think Bricktown really matters. I think it matters to the future of our city in so many respects. And is it time to, can I go ahead and move to deny? Because I don't think, there's a couple options. Y'all could try again, and we could postpone it, or...
We can look at it. We can do some more investigation into your option of flipping it around. But, if we do that, it's... For people walking down the canal, it's going to be a visual impairment overhead for them looking at the same building you're talking about before. On that route, since we'd be out over the edge, like I said, to be adding columns, I'm kind of at a loss of what to tell you. To provide ADA access at that point, I'm open to suggestions, but I don't think they're, like I said, we can look at flipping it and look at those alternatives and what would be involved. But if we go back through the redesign process, and I know it's not your cost, but it's a cost to the citizens, and we may be able to come up with another plan, but it still comes back to we need to get people from point A to point B, and if we look at an alternate route, there's going to be new visual impairments. Mm-hmm. You may be able to see one portion easier, but it's going to block another portion, and it's going to be kind of freestanding out there, to where you're still going to have more additional handrails, because you'd have handrails, have to have handrails on both sides of that ramp. I mean,
Well, this gets into sort of, why we were wanting to talk about some three-dimensional modeling or see some greater contemplation that went into this, but having someone fly out over the water is an invitation to like, oh, what's down there? And we're already doing that. We're crossing the water with the pedestrian bridge that's on Oklahoma Avenue. And when you use a pathway, you can lead the eye where you want it to go. And here, we sort of piled all this stuff up in front and blocked that oblique view down to the water, where you've got to walk all the way up on this ramp and around it, and then turn your head to look down. And that's where putting it out over the water it's almost like putting a frame around the water and draws your eye down in. It's a very different idea about what you're doing with the element that you have to have. If you, for example, if you've got those giant transmission towers running through your neighborhood, where you're trying to sell $500,000 homes, the ones that require 130-foot wide OG&E easement.
right away.
You can't plant big enough trees. Of course, OG&E will cut them down, but you can't plant big bushes around them to try and mask them. But what you can do is use the ground plane to move people's eye with a big wide sidewalk and low plantings to move people to where they're seeing something else that you want to show them. And then the tower kind of disappears. Here, this approach to this ramp, bringing it right up front into the foreground of the landscape, we're doing this with it. My suggestion of pushing it out and having it, fly over the water is a couple of things. It's inviting us out to more deeply engage with the water, but it's also creating a anamorphic frame. And this goes back to the origins of landscape architecture and the work that was being done in the 16th century France with that ended in Versailles and the whole the birth of landscape architecture. And that these aren't absurdist ideas. They're deep principles that André Lenotre developed, and then they were carried forward by the guys like Olmsted that leave these big legacies of public space that get used. And I think the engagement, one of the things that I bring in a talented landscape architect or architect to just concept this thing, to kind of go, let's think about trying to accomplish this, and then it could also be part of a larger language that did something related to take us down to the canal. Then we've got some structure that we can begin to work from on a going forward level as we find other sources of funding, and a comprehensive plan and a way to pay for it. And the visual obstruction thing, I think merits contemplation, as to what's it really doing in three-dimensional space.
Any way we put it in, there's going to be some visual impairment. The photograph they have up here right now, if we switch the L route, that would mean from the left side of the picture, it would be going across towards the patio. So you're going to have a visual impairment of the canal itself from the same point of view on the sidewalk here. And that was my point. No matter where we put it, there's going to be some visual impairment of the canal. From this point of view, when you look towards the canal, it's going to completely obstruct the canal and the opposite side of the canal, between the railings and the ramp itself. Now, if that's the option you want us to pursue, we can look at it, but I'm just trying to point out that there are no good solutions to this.
Yeah, and this is so hard. We're in the language of drawing, and we're definitely not in the language of words. And so what I'm trying to describe to you that makes a frame around the canal, the water is the canal, and this obscures the water. Whereas if you L-shape it and go out and around, you draw a frame around the water. And then anytime we have a frame, our eye looks into that frame. That's windows do that, television does that, these little movie screens we're looking into. And now you've taken a visual impairment and turned it into a picture frame. It's a different idea. And going the other direction, we haven't created this obstruction in front of the Kingman building. So you're kind of getting two things by turning this thing on its head. And again, this is a drawing thing as opposed to a visual word description.
Is this concept that the rest of the board would want to see? I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of funds having it redesigned and then come back and have a whole new set of objections on it.
I think it would be, it'd probably be better than the alternative, for sure. I mean, yes.
I mean, and I would encourage you not to just stop with saying that Richard's idea is the only idea that's available. I mean, I think we're also talking about making it not look like an afterthought or something's just scabbed onto the side of the current bridge. You know, is there an opportunity where you just solely wrap the balcony itself and have a structure coming up off and wrapping around that on three sides as a U shape? And I know we're saying that the structure underneath might not support it, and I love you thinking that way because I'm actually a structural engineer. But the opportunity of maybe using that, and then it pushes it into the background rather than bringing it to the foreground of where we're talking about pedestrian traffic. So I think it's really an encouragement to say, hey, with these comments that we have concerns for, is there a way that we can rethink it that really makes it fit like it's a piece that was part of the original intent versus hiding the fact that we took out a lift? So I think that's really the thought process we're wanting to encourage and see if there's another opportunity there. I agree, because you're going to have all these, you know, I'm looking at it from what the ramp structure itself is doing. When we're right on the corner, you're going to have all these different layers of the stringers with their little flanges turning out, and it's just going to look like it's scabbed onto the side. And I mean, people are driving past that corner here. We're walking past it. There's going to be a lot of traffic there. So I think if you push it a bit further from that corner, this interior corner here, we're going to have a much higher visual success. So I think that's the comment really, is don't just think we have to proceed with turning it 180, but is there a way to even wrap that balcony?
I'm in total agreement with everyone up here. And I think what we're driving at here is that we feel like there's an additional discipline that needs to be added to the engineering team, one that brings a design solution. I think everything we've seen is it's such a technical solution rather than an urban design solution. So if you could bring somebody in that could come back to us with some additional thought that we can consider, I think that is the overarching kind of solution that we see moving forward. In order to do that, we need you to agree to continue the item and come back to us with some additional graphic support addressing the surface. Again, I want to make sure that we get that the grading was an issue, the design is an issue, the landscaping is an issue. So those three items specifically, we would need you to agree to come back to us with.
We can do that.
Okay.
Move to continue.
Jim, for the May 9th meeting, we would need your stuff in 7 to 10 days.
And there's no way we can have it redesigned. We'd have to wait until the June meeting.
That's what I was going to say. How about the June 13th?
I mean, it'll take us, June, we can try for that.
Move to continue to the June meeting.
June 13th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, aye? Aye.
Jim, thank you so much. We know this hasn't been easy. and it's been a lot more time intensive than you were expecting, but we really appreciate you taking the time to work with us and listen to us. I know it's not been, so thank you very
I
much.
appreciate all your concerns. It's just, like I said, I have a limited budget I can work with on this, and we're spending money.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, item number 7, other business, we do not have any. Item 8, the administrative approval report. We don't do anything there, we had 3 items approved. Any comments from the planning department staff?
None this time?
Okay. Comments from committee members? None? All right, our next meeting date will be May 9th of 2018. Michael, do we have anything so far looking?
Pretty likely we're going to be canceling that meeting because we don't have any. Yesterday was the deadline for May's meeting, and we didn't receive any submittals that would require
Isn't there
committee
something
action.
Coming from Arts Commission?
I'm sorry?
Isn't there something coming from Arts Commission?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, we do have that one item.
Richard said he's got a $50 million project or something that's coming.
No.
I think I'll be in here with a sign. I don't think it's,
All right.
I have one of those.
With that, we will adjourn the meeting at 10:07. Thank you.